Hi, welcome again. My name is Simon Wallace. I'm one of the committee members of the Consultancy Specialist Group. Also with me today from the committee, I have Alan Moore, who is our chairman, and Antonio, who is another committee member, and tonight he will be keeping a particular eye on the questions and feeding those in and running the polls. So he'll be working some of the controls behind the scenes. Today we have Lloyd Skinner talking about will AI disrupt project management consulting? And very briefly, Lloyd is a project program portfolio PMO expert with about 30 years of experience in those fields. He's a senior program manager who's delivered multi-million-pound programs with teams of over 1,000 people at times, experienced in strategic change and transformation, including building, infrastructure, and operational change. But I will leave Lloyd to say more about himself and his firm. I'm sure he's in a much better position to brief you on that. We'll probably talk for an hour or so, and if there's time at the end, have a bit more interaction with some questions. But Lloyd, I think it's over to you.
Okay, thank you, Simon, and thank you, Alan and Antonio, for supporting me this evening. This is the first time I've used the GoToWebinar app, so hopefully I won't hit any technical issues. For those that haven't used it, I can't see the audience at all, so if you're drastically waving your hands about and trying to get my eye, then as Simon said, use the chat and I'll try and break in and get an answer to you then. But hopefully I also won't see anybody falling asleep as well. So there you go. So as Simon said, this evening, I'm going to talk about whether AI will disrupt project management consulting. So I'm going to dive in. Just very quickly then, in terms of my background, as Simon said, I'm sort of coming up to 30 years now in working in projects and programs. There's a couple of the big ones there on the side. I was the overall program manager for a couple of building centered transformation programs for the BBC. So if anybody's listening or been to Cardiff recently, you'll probably know both of those locations. I had both the property teams, the tech teams, both broadcast tech and business systems, business change, etc., all reporting into me. So I was the overall program manager. I was the conductor, if that's the right phrase. I've worked in various corporates over my time. There's a few there listed. I also had a slightly unusual route into senior program management in the fact that my first roles were in project planning and project support office, PMO, and of course as the projects got bigger, the responsibilities started blurring between supporting projects and being responsible for them as well. I also did a master's at LSE in analysis, design and management of information systems, and the reason why that's important is because on the 25-year anniversary post-course get-together, I reconnected with an old colleague who became my co-founder of Greyfly a couple of years ago. She'd gone off and became a IT auditor for the mainly for the big four consultants type, so your KPMGs, your PwCs, etc. And that evening we got discussing whether there is a possibility that you could apply AI to project management, and more specifically at that particular time, AI to project assurance. And you won't be surprised to know that we concluded the answer was yes. So we've now been in this space for a couple of years, and we've got a practice now which has two sides, if you like. Down the left-hand side there, you can see a sort of traditional project management consulting. So, we provide assurance services, giving those people responsible for projects comfort that their project's going to succeed, or perhaps knowledge that their projects will fail or not achieve its outcomes. We also look at the project methods, so which processes you should follow, and of course we provide some senior project delivery resources as well. Having said all of that gives us great knowledge and experience for the right-hand side there, which is really what we've been focusing in on the last couple of years. And I think, we're certainly one of the first in this market. There are definitely more companies appearing over the last couple of years. And I'll come back to that because I think that's really important point to note, that there are more entrants into this marketplace. So we basically have three service lines in and around that. We've got a discover piece, which is about working out how to take a client on the journey towards the blue sky of driving efficiencies and driving benefit through the application of AI to project management. The second piece is around prediction and predicting project outcomes, and that's really interesting. I'm going to come back to that a little bit more. So identifying which projects are likely to be the highest risk, or will they deliver to those plans that you've just told your chief executive to sign on the dotted line, if you like. The other piece is around automation and automating elements of the project delivery piece. A couple of other little bits there on the right-hand side. You can see we've also got a strategic collaboration with the University of Southampton in place, which I'm absolutely thrilled about, actually. For those that don't know, the University of Southampton has a school of project management. It's a top 10 UK university. The School of Project Management has 300 students a year. They also have a really strong capability and work and research regularly with the APM as well. On a personal note, I get to hang around with the Professor of Project Management, so I like to tell all my friends there that as well. We're also a preferred supplier to the BBC for program management, which again puts us in quite good stead along, those brands which you are more likely to know, as it were. So enough about us anyway. So rather than diving into the talk, I thought I'd start the conversation with a nice little poll. So the first poll of the evening, and just to get a feel for you guys as an audience, it's just do you think the robots are coming? Are the robots going to take over our jobs? So the poll is will we be taken over by robots? Obviously, this is in the PM community perspective. Will it be augmented? Will robots help us do our jobs better, or are you, dare I say, more of a Luddite in nature and not impacted at all? So those are the choices. If you just take a moment and answer, and then we'll look at the results in 1 second.
Yeah, let's close the voting. And I hand it back to you.
Okay, do you tell us the results now, Antonio?
So in the results, we have that 10% answered that they were going to be taken over by the robots. We're going to have 78%, which said that is going to be augmented by robots, and 12% that is not going to be impacted at all.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for those results. I'm obviously most intrigued by the either extremes. I hope, but who knows, that those 10% that said we were going to get taken over by robots have a very nice life, as it were. Those that are not in believe, the 12% that don't believe will be impacted, hopefully by the end of this talk that you'll get a view that perhaps that there will be impacted. I personally like this word augmented. It's a phrase that appears in numerous pieces of research around that, and you know, you won't be surprised, but that's where I sit, certainly in my lifetime anyway. So thank you for that, guys. Just a little bit of fun. So we're gonna continue onwards to talk about how AI may or may not be disrupting project management consulting. Before we dive into the detail, I just wanted to, you know, as practitioners, you know, either direct practitioners or certainly experts in this area, I just wanted to put up some quick statistics, because, you know, and these aren't my statistics, they're the APM statistics. I'm afraid to say, guys, projects fail, and projects fail at an alarming rate. You can see there that 30% fail, and it rises to 70% if there's an IT element. And of course, as we know, that virtually all projects have an IT element. And when we commissioned this research 6 months ago, I think the thing that surprised me the most was that those statistics of failure held true across various industries. So it didn't matter whether you were in financial services or you're in construction or media or broadcast. They're the same rates that they fail. It doesn't matter what project type that you are talking about, whether it's a building project, a pure tech project, or a business change project, those failure rates still maintain. Similarly, it doesn't matter whether you're running an agile project or a waterfall or a hybrid somewhere in between. Again, those failure rates hold true. And then finally, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a £10,000 project or a £10 billion project. Projects still fail. Now, to me, that's really, really kind of alarming, and you know, that was a real sort of oh my moment when the results of this research came back. So, as you can imagine, we as a company then dug into the reasons behind those failures, and we ended up, you know, it's just our company's method of looking to define those foundations for what we call the foundations for project success, and we clustered those into 7 areas. And, you know, I don't think there's particularly any rocket science that, you know, if we stood everybody up against the wall and said, give me a reason for project failure, I think somebody is most likely to call out the majority of those. We've actually then broken those down into 32 capabilities and 130 elements. Now, that was our first dive into this thought as to how do you think about computerizing, how to look at AI in project management. And everything we do as a company comes back to those reasons. Actually, we've delved in and we update this research regularly, and each one of those elements has its own weighting as to which is the most important. I would normally ask for a show of hands here, but you know, I got this wrong. So I'll let you ponder which one it is, but I think only a very small a number of you will realize that the number one reason for project failure is business requirements. So there you go. The news flash though, guys, and obviously I'm having to update all my materials, is that the APM have just published a new piece of research to say that actually 80% of projects fail. So, you know, that oh wow moment just got even bigger. So, you know, guys, this points to me that, you know, if this volume of projects fail, you know, don't deliver to time, budget, or realize the benefits, then surely we should be looking for new ways as to deliver projects. So that's the backdrop of what we're going to talk about. You know, we need to address the real project problem. Now, of course, that's easier said than done. We all know that the projects are complex. You know, why are they complex? You know, they've got tens, hundreds, depending on the size of the project, thousands of moving parts, you know, and even a very small project, you can, I don't know, miss a dependency, misunderstand a task duration, not have sufficient resource allocated, not have good sponsorship, go back to those reasons for failure. Now, for me, this is a bit of a dichotomy because, you know, on the one hand, as we've just pointed out, you've got failure going on in projects. On the other hand, you've got that, as I quote there, the 94%, and these aren't my quotes again, apologies I haven't put the references on there. Anybody that wants to know them, give me a shout afterwards and I'll get the proper references added. 94% of organisations think that project management is vital. So you've got this dichotomy going on here. You've got on the one hand projects failing, on the other hand companies seeing that that's the way to get things done and to improve the bottom line. And you know, as we all know, the world we live in is often about the bottom line. Now, actually, as well as those tens, thousands, hundreds of thousands of moving parts in there, I think the other point about here is that projects are made up of people. And, you know, unfortunately, because of the nature of people, you know, whether that means personal views, whether that means the politics, whether that means how you conduct yourself, that comes into this whole nature of project delivery. Now, you start thinking about that from okay, so if there are a human dimension to projects, well, how do we make AI apply to the human dimension? Now, I'm going to come back to that as we go through this presentation. And when I started these conversations a couple of years ago, a lot of people just looked at me strangely and thought, you know, it's just impossible to computerize the human and the human brain. Now, I'm hoping that by the end of this talk that you'll see that advances in AI and computing are working exactly on that challenge. There is some way to go, but they are certainly moving that way. Now, I appreciate that although people listening no doubt have heard the phrase AI and artificial intelligence, or if they're like me, every other story is in and around AI on their news feed, on their LinkedIn feed, or you know, their BBC online or whatever it is. But I think there's a lot of people that don't necessarily understand the definition of AI. So again, there's just a reference definition there. And, you know, it's about the simulation of human intelligence by computers or by machines. Now, that sounds so broad to me. I like the sub definition there. and you know, particularly those words in bold about learning, you know, acquiring and defining the rules for using information, reasoning. Now that starts getting really interesting to me. You know, we're trying to define a set of rules to work out a set of conclusions. And then possibly the hardest thing of all, the self-correction, the self-learning. So we're going to talk about a little bit about machine learning in that space as well. So hopefully that's just giving you a very quick definition of what AI is about. You know, some people might see that as slightly scary. I mean, this talk isn't about the ethics of AI. There is a whole subgenre around AI and ethics. And if you do have an interest in that, I would encourage you to do some Googling and start looking at that. It is something that as AI applications are developed, is very important that the training data, what the computer is learning against, does have no bias in it. So it's all about removing bias, as opposed to us humans, of course, that are completely objective. But there you go. Now the other point here is just picking up on that point about AI. There's some Gartner quotes there. The point is this is a bit of a modern day gold rush. Your organizations will have AI projects going. They tend to, up until this moment, be in the domains where you find larger data sets, so things like financial services or billing, customer care systems in utilities, telcos, etc. However, they are starting to make inroads into every industrial sector, and you can see there's some stats there that it's starting to apply in all sectors. In terms of project management, it really is still early days, but it's definitely coming, and I'm going to demonstrate to you guys where it's coming. So, okay, so I'm just going to do a couple of slides around the products that are starting to appear on the marketplace and how we've classified those products. You know, I said it's coming, and I think it's coming because people are starting to believe in the vision of the benefits that AI may unlock, and you know, this is just a particular interpretation of the kind of benefits that AI might unlock. So starting in the top right there, you know, you might start to see insight in your historical project data. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a second, but you know, which projects typically succeed or which projects typically fail, or you know, which project manager always delivers to time and budget but uses up too much resource, for example. So you can start getting a handle on your historical project data, which in turn means that you can start identifying which projects are at risk. And of course, if you've got projects at risk, as an organization responsible for project delivery, it means that those projects at higher risk, that you can start having some grown-up objective conversations as to what to do about those. And perhaps even better, if you understand those earlier in the life cycle, you can start addressing and debating about those earlier in the life cycle. Which means that you can obviously start thinking about your allocation of your resources and perhaps even stopping projects before you burn multi-million pounds, or at least certainly applying your greatest PMs, you know, with the greatest track record, or those limited resources around assurance, so that you're focusing your effort on the projects that are highest risk. Moving round there, the other piece there is there's a whole paradigm shift here, that in particular in the domain of the PMO community, where there may be a move from an admin mindset, you know, dare I say, shuffling bits of paper around, getting those reports in on a Friday afternoon, knowing that you need to publish that report on a Monday morning. So those stakeholders who are reviewing the details of those reports can start really fine-tuning and objectively debating and deciding that what those bits of data are telling us. So there's a whole mindset there about moving administration forward, as it were. Now, because I want a sip of tea, I'm just going to stop a second. And Antonio, have we had any questions in yet?
Hi, Lloyd. We have a comment regarding the survey, and basically they were commenting that they were choosing non-impact because in some occasions robots will not, they don't think that they impact their specific situation. So they are
okay. So they do believe in augmentation as opposed to don't believe that will impact only in a specific area. Yeah.
Yeah. So there might be very specific or very specialized positions that won't be impacted by the robots. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings about that?
Yeah, I mean, keeping that to the project domain, I tend to agree with that. And in actual fact, as we go through this talk, I'm working my way towards which areas of project management consulting I believe are more likely to be impacted. And certainly there are some areas where the impact is more likely to be limited. I guess, you know, it depends also how much of a time horizon that you're putting to these things. You know, it's not so long ago, obviously not showing my age too much, that I got a Sinclair ZX80 with 1K of memory, Antonio. You know, who can believe that? So the speed of change is ridiculously fast. You know, I've been in talks where people speculate when they will see an artificial being walking down the road. Now, I think there's a couple of words that I've used there, walking. Now, if I remove the word walking and throw the definition of robots a little bit wider. So, for example, we're already aware that Amazon are testing the delivery using machinery rather than delivery drivers. So you know, there are elements of robots coming into our everyday life. When you scan your shopping at the self-service till, you know, for the pure definition of robots, that is a robot that you're scanning your food into. So you know, my personal view is it all depends on time horizon. I don't want to be too off the wall, but you know, some of the stuff I've seen coming on these various talks, you know, certainly go beyond what, you know, the man on the street might consider the word augment means. So.
Yeah, good, really good answer.
Okay. Any more, Tony? There's probably time for one more.
Yes, I have another one, which is just comment. Would it be better to spend time and effort increasing human intelligence rather than teaching robots to identify mistakes?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and you know, ultimately, from myself personally, I think that probably goes down to your political beliefs as well. You know, the challenge you've got there is, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, robots are more able to digest larger volumes of data at greater speed and provide insight than a single human being. Now, even if you had multiple human beings together, the power of multiple computers certainly outweigh a single human being. Now, that's not necessarily meaning that at this moment in time that robots can take over all jobs, or all jobs are appropriate to be taken over by robots, as it were. Generally speaking, without pleading the fifth, I think that, you know, the power, the promise of efficiency, the capitalistic society we live in is likely to drive the fuel for greater efficiency, greater cost savings. So unfortunately, I'm afraid it's coming, and therefore I believe the investment is more likely to be going into computing and robots than humans. Of course, you know, back to those ethics, perhaps we can all do a 2-day week or something instead.
Okay, thank you very much, Lloyd. That's all the questions that we have for now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Antonio. That's great. So, as I said, what I was going to do is I'm going to talk about a classification of AI in project management. This diagram here, 2x2 diagram, is just a simple way of trying to get your head around the development of products in this space. Across the top there, from a horizontal point of view, going left to right, you've got the amount of humans in the loop, so it sort of plays into the question that we just received. And, you know, going from left to right, you've got an increasing amount, or rather a reducing amount of humans within the loop. So in terms of streamlining, that will be adding to existing processes, so bringing processes together. And I'm going to dive into examples of each of these in 1 second. In terms of automation, obviously that's taking the human out of the loop. So again, you know, start thinking about that in terms of project management. For those who are active practitioners of project management, you know, you start thinking about you as a project manager, you know, where in your daily or your weekly life is your administrative burden? You know, typically the answers you would get in there are reporting, communications, logging, repeating the logging of data. Now, if you can start working your way through that and taking that away, if there's adequate return on investment, then I think there's pressure to automate. Similarly, if you then look at this from a horizontal point of view and you start thinking about the intelligence of the computer itself, again, you can move down there in terms of moving from basic computing and basic computer use. I mean, it's not that long ago. I should know this actually. When MS Project went to market in the masses, it's certainly probably 25 years since I've used it. Although personally, for those people that liked it, my sadness is actually liking drawing Gantt charts. That's how I got into project management in the first place. But the point is that there are tools now appearing that are making your life as a project manager or project support professional life easier. Now, in terms of insight and foresight, again, that comes back to predicting outcomes and thinking about which way they're going to go. Now, what we're seeing here is that in terms of systems, the number of systems are predominantly in the top left-hand side there, in the streamlining. I mentioned MS Project. I'm going to mention several others in a second. However, automation tools are coming as well, and automating elements. You know, gone are those days where the PMO are going to have thousands of administrators in them. Gone are the days where, you know, you write that memo and walk around the corner to deliver it to your friend. So automation is coming. Now, perhaps the most exciting bits are around insight and foresight. And again, there's a real push, certainly from those people in the streamlining space, to try and make their tools cleverer than they ever have been, to give the users of those tools greater insight. So, for example, if I'm running projects and I've got a huge database of all my past projects, perhaps I can start understanding those and using those data points to provide some insight on future projects. Self-directed are basically where the humans no longer in the loop at all, and are likely to take a little bit longer to appear, but they are starting to appear, and certainly start to appear in some people's thoughts. You know, and if it starts with the vision, then I think it carries on. So I'm just going to take a moment just to talk this through in a little bit more detail. So there's some more specific definitions there of streamlining. So this research was done within the last year. There were 300 plus project tools. That number is growing every week. So the types of tools, as I'm sure we're all familiar with, are scheduling tools, issue risk management, portfolio management, resource management, team collaboration are obviously tools, you know, whether that be with the bigger players such as MS Project, or the new young guns with your Mondays and those type of products, which are more pointed towards perhaps smaller project environments or digital projects, to coin another phrase. Now, the point is that many organizations use many tools as well, and those tools are often perhaps used separately in different departments, even within one department that uses the same tool as another department, they may be using the tool slightly differently. But also, perhaps those tools may not completely talk to each other, you know, in terms of the workflow of where those tools are used. And that's really where this streamlining comes in, is to drive some efficiency here across the tools. So you know, there's a few little examples there, you know, reminding people of putting your timesheets in if you're in that type of environment, or sprint reminders, or your general status reports, and this whole idea of chatbots, which we're all becoming familiar with on various websites that we visit to do our utility paying, are starting to appear in all sorts of project tools and providing messaging. Now, without being too the harbinger of scariness, but every time that you input that data, obviously that's being recorded, and therefore that data can be reviewed and analysed and based on. So, you know, it's not just being recorded to make suggestions a la Facebook, but it's also being recorded for segmentation purposes and to drive the development of those products, or perhaps give you adverts for whatever you've been talking about that particular week. So that is coming, and that's probably something that we can already see, you know, whether that be versions of new products or or versions of products being amalgamated together. So the lines are increasingly becoming blurred between what is a planning tool and what is a portfolio management tool. You know, is an obvious upwards blurring, if you like. Now, in the automation side, again, there are tools starting to appear in this, primarily around bots and chatbots to perform some of the simpler tasks where they can replace the human being. And you know, back to that same point that I mentioned earlier, they can do it at a much faster rate than a human. You know, you're also getting some examples where there are some tools starting to read some of those messages and starting to self-populate issues. So, you know, perhaps those days where you were hiding that issue from the boss that the project's going to be 3 months late and twice the budget is suddenly going to appear on the PMO's radar, and they're going to start talking about it because they've seen you chatting to your colleagues about it. Now, that may be slightly scarier to just checking data consistency, you know, and data consistency in the project world is an awful problem, you know, and it goes back to one of the biggest challenges here around applying AI to project management is the languages that we use, the data quality needs enhancement. So there are tools that are coming to enhance the data quality as well. So you know, these are coming fairly rapidly, and depending on the size of your project's capability, the amount of investment in automation will increase or decrease. So, for example, you are not going to automate the reporting of a system and invest loads in perhaps a bespoke development as well if you only have a handful of project managers. If you have hundreds of project managers and all of that savings that you make across those projects adds up to whole people, then perhaps there's a business case starting to appear to drive automation. So think about larger projects there. So not just single portfolios of projects, but perhaps those largest projects of them all, those mega projects that we embrace. So there's just another one there, again, about productivity. In terms of insight and foresight and self-directed, now, I think the point here is those people that are from a computing background will know that expert systems have been around since the 70s. And, you know, this is not a new discipline that we're talking about here. You know, a decision tree can be replicated, can be programmatized. And I guess the difference between today and the 70s and 80s is the computing power. You know, the way that we can write computer programs has moved rapidly forward. The speed that we can create computer programs has moved rapidly forward. Now, the problem is, again, this goes back to legacy-wise, if you can imagine if you had created an expert system for what is likely to be a complex problem, the softer side of interpretation was very hard to build into that system. So in other words, it would cost you as much to do the dreaded change requests to the computer system that it costs you to build the system in the first place. Now, the other development that is happening at a rapid rate of knots is machine learning. And this is where the machine is starting to use these statistical techniques. And believe me, guys, the number of statistical techniques is vast, and trying to find the right ones for the appropriate project problem is challenging, and you know, that's where those great brains at the University of Southampton are helping us. So it's not just like, you know, here's a load of data, drop the silver bullet on there and whiz bang pop, there you go, there's your projects that are going to succeed or fail. But the point is that machine learning is coming, and the computer can be learning itself, you know, and the more times it does this, the greater the learning can become. So the challenge then is about the data sets again, as I mentioned, but also the training of the algorithms. And again, that comes back to the ethics that we talked about, you know, not making sure that they are unbiased. So, you know, in case you guys didn't hear it, data is a big challenge in this world. Now, in terms of self-directed, we haven't come across these yet. Now, that's not to say, as I just mentioned, that they aren't being thought about, they aren't being developed in the background. Now, you think about this, but from a slightly broader sense. There's a couple of examples there about the autopilots on aeroplanes. We are all fairly comfortable with that premise, and all know that once a plane has perhaps taken off and landed, that the vast majority of the flight is under autopilot. We also know that self-driving cars are coming at a rapid rate of knots, and you know, are being actively tested on our roads, and certainly in some countries are actually free to operate. Now, if you start thinking about that premise and think about the robo-PM, as somebody coined, you start getting the idea of where self-directed may be heading towards. And again, if you start thinking about smaller projects, perhaps, where, you know, go back to your expert system there, where there is a decision tree, you know, is there project budget available for this small work? Has XYZ person approved it? You could start programming that, and perhaps that means that a human might not necessarily need to do that particular task. So, you know, this increased decision making by computers is coming, guys, and it's just a question of when. And we need to work out what that means to us as individuals, but also to us as our organizations. Now, the key here for me is the next evolution in this space will be that moving out of streamlining and pressures into automation and pressures into insight and foresight. Now, I'm going to stop there and invite a couple more questions before we then start talking about, well, how do you actually make this happen? How do you go about that? And once I've then finished talking about that, then we're going to start speculating, well, what does that really mean for PM consulting? So I'm just going to take a sip, Antonio, if you can think about whether there's any new questions that have come in.
Sure, Lloyd. We have two more questions right now. We have the first question, I think is really interesting. Do you think that task estimation accuracy is one of the first areas that AI can deliver improvements? Estimations.
Yeah, estimation, yes. I personally do believe that. Perhaps I would say that, given that that's the space that we're developing in. I think what there is there's loads of layers to that question, Antonio. And my personal view is that you've got to be careful that you don't try and run before you walk. I personally believe there should be a layered approach on that. So for example, you know, wrapping that back up to that data preparation point. You know, it amazes me to think the maturity of organizations around projects and project data. So can the majority of organizations say, for example, that they even have their basic data in a trusted mode. I don't know, the start and finish date for a project, the start and finish date compared to the baseline for a project. So actually, I do believe that is an area that will be one of the first areas to be addressed. But I also believe there's a lot of work to make that happen and really drive that forward in a sensible way. You know, there's a whole mindset thing here, Antonio, that you know, this is innovation, and therefore there's an innovation mindset required as well, which means that you perhaps need to experiment, which means that you may need to experiment with models of prediction and model outcomes. But again, you know, those evangelists that are getting on with this are the ones that are likely to get to the spoils of those benefits in a more rapid way. So yes, that was a long answer, but yes, Antonio, I do.
Long answer, a good answer.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Good. We have another question. So in an insight, have you seen any applications of AI to either impacting or delaying analysis?
In impacting what, sorry, Antonio?
The impact in impacting or delay analysis. And that's the question. That's what I read. The question is
analysis.
If they are impacting or if they are delaying analysis. The analysis.
Yes, I have actually, and again, I think that's very similar to the previous question, and again, I think this goes back to, you know, my jolly old father, rest his soul. I remember him a long time ago talking about the sort of garbage in, garbage out. I'd just come out of LSE, you know, I thought I knew everything, and you know, he sort of turned to me over a pint in a pub on a Sunday, which he was quite prone to doing, by the way. And so, you know, and he said, Lloyd, you know, it's all well and good, this computer malarkey, but it's all garbage in, garbage out. And he's absolutely right. And I think, again, this goes back to the danger here, that you try and run before you walk. You know, you start to try and get to the nth degree of why a delay occurred, you know, and before you know it, your data is all over the shop and you can't find meaning. So yes, I do believe that those tools are appearing on the marketplace. We are developing one ourselves, but I also believe that they need to be developed and built on as you go. So
there is a process, isn't it? First, we have to have all the data in place. Then we have to bring the first step to automation, and then little by little, step by step.
Yeah, absolutely, Antonio. And actually, the very next slide, we're going to talk about that process in a little bit more, or a view of the process. The one thing I would say, Antonio, if I just skip back here, is you know, if I then start thinking about which order, if you're a company, which order do you attack these in? I think it's really interesting. I read some research, as I do, or rather people feed the research into me, where some you know, very astute professors were basically saying the first step on the journey is automation. Now, actually, I would challenge that to say, perhaps you are right, the first step is automation. But actually, perhaps the first step is insight and foresight. Actually, the point here is that there are barriers to moving on this journey. You know, I've said it several times about data. You know, and then if you extend that into systems as well, you know, which tools are you using? Are your tools and your data all in one place? Actually, I think that ultimately which way you go is a combination of the good old people, process and system. You know, so like any good project, you need to take people on that journey. You will need a effort to train and bring people from a change management point of view. Can you imagine now, you do a piece of research and analysis around their legacy projects, and you find that, I don't know, all projects run by the president of north of England, sorry, not picking on the north, president of the south of England, all his or her projects are always late, and you present that at the board meeting. Well, that is a change management piece in its own right. And therefore, it's not just about the actors who will be using these systems. It's about those people who will be impacted by, the information that's being presented. And similarly, in terms of the process, well, we've just talked about data. And you think about what creates data in the main. It's your processes, it's your project methods. If your planning is not very good, then you need to address your planning, and yes, you can throw a tool at that, and that may improve it somewhat, but actually you also need to look at your processes for planning as well. So, for me, moving this stuff forward is a transformation. It's a journey of bringing all of these elements together.
What is your view on the combination of blockchain and artificial intelligence? And it brings a use case, which is could be contractor submitting. Hold on, this is too small for me.
So I would guess the question, as I understand it, and I'm not a deep technologist. Yeah, I should have said that right at the beginning, perhaps. Yeah, blockchain is about matching data together, so to get one version of the truth. Again, a bit like AI, it's relatively in its embryonic stages, and the use cases around blockchain are getting increasingly fascinating in all sorts of domains. I was speaking to a company the other day who was looking at the testing of fire doors and matching that fire door had been registered in the blockchain, and therefore the certification was matched. And if somebody said they hadn't checked that fire door again, you could go to the blockchain. So I think it's a really interesting question. As you can tell by my fumbled answer, I'm trying to come to an answer. So whoever posed that question, I'd be interested to know what their thoughts are as well about how you could apply blockchain to the PM community. Perhaps an obvious one is in baselining and the truth around baselining, because baselines tend to alter, or certainly some organizations or individuals make baseline after a project is completed, but perhaps that's the domain of some. So yeah, I'd be interested to know if that person does write back into you, Antonio, about what their views are. I'd be really intrigued to hear that.
Right. The person at the moment is Neil. He added a little bit of information regarding his use case. The idea is that a client system is pulling cost and progress info to update your schedule and cost reports automatically. The idea is that the artificial intelligence could then interpret the effect of your schedule and make an objective recommendation based on your historical data and risk profiles. And then eventually, the human to decide which recommendation to accept.
Yeah, well, I'm going to move on there, because actually that's exactly what we're going to talk about. I didn't quite get the blockchain angle. When you started speaking, I was thinking, suppliers into a kernel of a PMO function, for example, matching, akin to matching invoices, but this time matching timesheets or tasks or something like that. So there possibly is an angle. It's not an angle that I personally have pursued or or have experience in. But I can see there's a possible angle. To be honest, guys, most of my time is working on this prediction side and trying to get that to work. There may be an angle there. So if somebody's got something, please link in with me and write to me, and I'll be very happy to have a chat with you. Now, in terms of how you go about implementing AI into project management, this particular diagram is called it's published by Gartner, and it's what they call their analytics continuum. And that, along with the reasons why the real project problem, why projects fail, is really the journey that we as a company are going on, but also the journey that we are taking our clients on with us. And if you just look at the steps there on the diagram, and I'll try and put some flour onto them using project management. Now, ultimately, go back to the real project problem. For me, what we're trying to solve here is reducing the volume of project failure, or conversely increasing the volume of project success. Now, if you look at this from a prediction point of view, you start off by looking at your historical data. And you start looking at which projects succeeded and failed. And you know, I think typically most organizations have some form of data around plan, cost, and people, resource, and you can start identifying which projects succeeded and which projects failed. You can then start diving into that data. So, as I said a second ago, perhaps projects using a certain type of technology typically are late by X, or perhaps projects who are run by a certain project manager or sponsored by a certain person, or perhaps projects that are greater than £500,000, or perhaps projects that use 10,000 man days worth of effort. So you can start building up a set of insights that you can start understanding how well or otherwise your projects performed. Now, the key there is that once you've got that set of insights, and the challenge then is not only getting that set of insights, we just talked about the barriers to entry to this piece of work around, you know, life and life statistics, garbage in, garbage out, is once you've got that set of features, is then overlaying that on your existing project portfolio. So that, again, looping this back into what I said earlier, overlaying that and identifying which projects are most likely to be at risk of success or risk of failure, dare I say it. Now, perhaps also, that's not just with your live projects. Imagine that if you've got that set of features, you can do that with projects that have not yet started as well. So that if you know that projects of this amount of budget, sponsored by this person, that have this amount of effort, you better put your best man or woman on to project manage them. You better drop in your assurance team, because they are likely to risk the business. Now, that's on an individual level. If you can then start thinking about that across your portfolio, it allows you as an organization to plan your portfolio better. It may mean that, you know, perhaps at the beginning of the year, you know that all these projects are going to be delayed, therefore you can start more projects off into the pipeline, as it were. So the idea here is that, you know, you look backwards through your historical project. So the person that raised the point about blockchain, they're absolutely right. You know, it's about understanding the past to inform the future, if you like. Now, and again, what we're saying there is you increasingly learn about the past. So you know, trading off, balancing that, don't run before you can walk type stuff, the insights that you find, you know, and the potential shockwaves that might create, you know, back to your business change element, once you've identified which of those projects typically succeed and fail. Or, you know, even before you can get to that point, you find that the data is flaky or data is missing, that you have to do a piece of work to prepare the data, which actually means that the process to create the data in the first place isn't fixed. You need to improve your planning. Oh, actually, we don't have a tool, we put it in a spreadsheet or whatever. Implement the tool. So before you know it here, you have got a transformation going through AI and project management. Now, the one thing that I hope that those people that are astute are listening to here is that there is a direct relationship here between the application of AI and the maturity of projects in your organization. Now, in other words, if you are a more mature organization, you are more likely to be able to apply AI in project management in a more rapid rate. And therefore, you are more likely to get to the spoils, the benefits, at a more rapid rate. Now, that's not to say all is lost. If you're at maturity level 1, I had a very interesting conversation the other day that actually, perhaps what you can do is you can benefit that if you're at a lower maturity level, that you don't have to deal with the baggage, the business change of the humans. You know, you can start putting the processes in place a lot quicker if you've got a clean sheet. One nameless organization that is currently going from 14 PMOs down to 1, can you imagine the resistance to change that they're going through? If there was just one set of truth, it is easier to jump to those insight steps a lot more rapidly. So you know, the point here is there's a direct relationship between the application of AI and project maturity. For those that follow Greyfly, look out, there's a story that's going to be published in a lot more detail with a lot more factual information in that. Couple of use cases, if you don't mind. So the first one is around project prediction. And some very high level diagram there, 5 steps if you like. First step is about identifying the project data. We just talked about, well, what data, and again that might be an iterative process. Obviously you then need to get that data in a certain format that you can bring it into a system to understand and to use into a data model. And that data model, as I've just said, might be iterative. And once you've got it in there, you can start doing some very clever stuff around understanding the historical stuff, but also then using the analytic tools to predict the future outcomes. Actually, that's just using relatively off-the-shelf products, but with the right capability, companies can move forward. The harder bits in that process is the data preparation, the data model, obviously you can rush through the analytics if you've done it more than once, and then the presentation, the prediction itself. Now, actually, we are working on that, but we're also working in parallel in that little box in the analytics engine. We're not just looking at the prediction, we're looking at the machine learning piece as well. So you know, this is coming, guys, and there are various companies working on this project prediction piece and looking at risk rating. So again, if you think about where we started this conversation, looping this back into, will AI impact project management consulting? Maybe I should have dropped the word consulting. Will AI impact project management? You can see there's an obvious use case there for prediction. Again, just building a little bit more into the use case around automation as well. This, going back to one of my favorite words, my favorite word of the week, augmentation. Now look at that statistic there about how much admin is done and how much AI is likely to change that. And again, there's a new set of examples there. The point here is that automation again is coming, guys, and you know, I've brought out more examples there of where you can look to automate. Now, the thing, you know, for those people who are pulling their hair out at me, if you've still got some left, as it were, is that for me, you know, all is not lost here. You know, this point is so that you can empower those individuals to work more on higher value tasks. Now, you know, you can argue what the higher value tasks are in project management, but perhaps they're more softer sides, such as influencing people, such as decision making, such as stakeholder management, such as change management. So if you have got those more mundane tasks running themselves, no longer are you sitting there for those mad people who do weekly status reports, filling in forms or emails to tell person X who may or may not glance at it, that actually you don't need to do that in 4 different places in 4 different formats. Because you've looked to automate it, it means that you are more likely to attack some of those human elements of what makes a project succeed. And go back to those 7 foundations of success. Change management is a huge piece, as is the people side of project delivery. So, right now, I'm going to stop there again, Antonio, before we then hit the last little piece of the talk.
We have only a couple of comments, so we can maybe do the question at the very end.
Okay, let's move on then, and we'll pick those off at the end. So, rounding into this, it was about will AI disrupt project management consulting? So I've just put what, you know, typical functions of project management consulting up there. I've written those, guys. I'm sure there's bits that I've missed to do with consulting. I've deliberately steered clear from more technical roles, for example, but you can see there's a series of areas where PM consulting works there. Hopefully they cover the vast majority of bases, and hopefully they're fairly self-explanatory. The point here, guys, is that perhaps those that are more eagle-eyed amongst you have noticed my cunning plan to colour code them. This is the point that in the red area, and this is very much talking generically, but my subjective view, when we start overlaying all of that data that I've talked about in terms of the types of tools appearing, which areas are most likely to be impacted at this moment in time the greatest, you can see that perhaps those areas in red are the softer type of skills of PM consulting. You know, those strategic thinking, you know, what is the strategy? Now, that's not to say these areas won't be impacted. You know, you think about in strategy, the amount of data that you need to gather to form strategies. They might not be being impacted by PM tools or AI PM tools, but there may be tools in their own particular domains that are being impacted by AI as well. So again, you know, this point that you're getting, the computing will be augmenting the consulting decisions and information that's being provided. Again, you know, you think about change management, again, those softer sides. However, when you start looking at the more dare I say, executable sides of project delivery and project support, I think that those are the areas that are most likely to be impacted. You know, you can see that throughout this talk, I've talked about those particular types of products, and then in particular, I've talked about prediction and automation. Now, those particular areas, you know, you think about whether that's the minutiae of planning tools, which are becoming cleverer and cleverer, or it's the prediction tools or the automation around project support and project management. So in my humble opinion, guys, I believe it's those areas that are more likely to be impacted by AI in project management first. But also, in my humble opinion, I believe that all areas will be impacted, and bringing that back to where we started was, you know, that actually, I do believe it's a matter of time. So, you know, to coin your phrase, you need to get on your bikes, guys, you know, and embrace technology, you know, in a sensible way, obviously. And beware of some of the pitfalls here. You know, those barriers to entry, go back to my people, process, system or slash data in this particular form. So in conclusion, guys, I believe that PM consulting is going to be impacted by AI. Now, I'm just going to stop there a second and invite the odd question, and then we'll just take a couple of minutes to wrap up again. So, Antonio, if people are rapidly adding questions, great. If not, perhaps we can take one of the earlier ones.
Yes, we have some questions, so they are quite interesting. So the first question that I'm going to throw is from Terry, and is do you rely on causation, or can I ask why, as opposed to a weaker correlation in terms of the artificial intelligence?
So this goes back to, I'm going to plead the fifth here. We're actually looking at all of those elements, and we are still on this journey ourselves to work out what is the appropriate set of tools and techniques to come to an answer to. So unfortunately, I'm not going to answer that question yet.
Right. Good. I'm going to throw at least the couple of more questions. The first one, let me read at least the next two, and then I will go for the last one. The next two are, isn't this all about, this is regarding, I understand, yeah, isn't this all about a process rather than content? Should that it allow to project to fail more efficiently? And the second question, will those administrative tasks be taken over by robotic process automation?
Okay, so I'm going to take the second one because I just need to get my head around the first one. For the person who wrote the first one, could they just try and articulate that just slightly clearer if possible? Thank you, people. The second one around robotic process automation, and I think it's really interesting, in particular, you know, in the domain of the PMO. Now, I presented a similar talk to this to about 60 PMO people at a very large telco not so long ago, and I was sort of, you know, expecting the arrows in my eyes around, you know, some of the stuff I was saying, which was, you know, in terms of the administration layer in projects, I do believe that is where the first elements of this will be impacted. So you know, where is the administration layer that is most tangible in projects? It is typical around administrators, coordinators, PMO type people. So on that side, I believe that there will be impact. You know, to what scale and when depends on the uptake of that particular client. Actually, I'm really interested in the RPA side, and this goes back to, if you think about project methods and, you know, what I said there about expert systems, you know, without doing project management a disservice, coming from somebody who's got circa 30 years experience, a project method at the highest level is a workflow. It's a set of do this, then do that. Now, I can't help but believe there are cases to apply RPA to the whole project workflow. Now, exactly what they are, nobody's yet given me enough money to do the research to answer the question. Undoubtedly, other people are starting to think about that as well. But yeah, the answer to that question, I don't think, like all of these things, it's, you know, a sudden silver bullet, as it were, but I do believe there is a use case around RPA and the project method. Yes.
Good. For the other question, is my understanding, and please, Gary, correct me if I'm misunderstanding you. So all these activities that we are talking about is project oriented. There is another component that is content, but there is another component that are humans. For example, leadership, definition, purpose, vision.
Yeah.
So there is definitely an impact that is being made on. I mean, there is not much that a computer or an artificial intelligence are going to be doing on.
Well, that goes back to how much you believe in this, Antonio. I'm 100% agreeing. Today, there are very few people that view some of those humanistic tasks to be able to be done by a computer. You know, and, you know, like you said, setting the vision. Well, you know, in terms of the diagram on screen, that ties in with that strategy point. Yeah, I absolutely agree. The offset to that, guys, is that, you know, we're at the foothills of a revolution here, you know. So if you ask me that question, if I happen to be around in 30 years, I think it will be a completely different landscape. Hopefully a landscape for the better, in terms of projects delivering first time, every time. So you know, if at the moment there is a gentle curve that says, you know, computing is less than 1% of project delivery, and I'm obviously making those numbers up to make the point. Actually, in 30 years' time, it might be that computing is 80% of project delivery. In 50 years' time, it might be 90%. Again, depending on the types of projects and all of that sort of stuff. So, you know, I think it's really hard to speculate about the future. You know, and it comes down to personal views and beliefs. What I do know is computer power is increasing. Computer-based intelligence is increasing, and that we unfortunately have a huge failure rate around projects. So I believe that will drive efficiencies and drive research in this area. So, you know, if you as an individual don't believe that, then you know, I perhaps, you know, would be on the other side of the debating team, as it were. So you know, I think it's coming, guys. You know, it's more speculative of when and how long and all of that sort of stuff. So. Okay, Antonio?
Yeah. We have also, I have just a reminder, we have 3 minutes to go. We have...
Should we now I put this poll in, but it's exactly the same poll again. You know, given that we've only got 3 minutes, we probably haven't got time to cover that second poll. I hope that I've convinced some of the audience that AI will disrupt project management consulting. I think the caveat to that is, although there's these potential of huge benefits, I think it's the old steady as she goes, so that fix, transform and develop in parallel. And as I said earlier, have an innovative mindset. Don't be scared of experimenting, and that point that this is a journey, that this is a transformation that you're potentially taking your organization through. So, roll forward a year and 2 years, there will be lots of statistics around the savings that are made for AI in this domain. McKinsey's quote savings of 33% in other domains, by the way, guys. So I see no reason that we won't reach those same type of hefty goals within the next few years. So from my point of view, that sort of wraps it up. That I believe that AI will disrupt PM consulting. It needs to be managed. It needs to be managed carefully, and it needs to be managed steadily. So that's just me about done. There you go. I've delivered to time, Antonio.
Brilliant. That's on time.
Absolutely excellent. Thank you so much, Lloyd. I can tell people really enjoyed that. There's some great questions, and anytime we sort of really want to keep going and the clock runs out, it's got to be a good session. We will, of course, be trying to get this recording to you as soon as possible if you want to replay any of it. We should also be able to put the slide pack up on our webpage. Lloyd, if that's okay with you?
Yeah, no, absolutely fine. And even one step further, if anybody wants to link in with me, do feel free to do that. Go and have a little look. I've had a couple of invites that I've been talking. So the wonders of modern tech.
Okay, well, many thanks indeed. I enjoyed that. I think everybody enjoyed it. Great session, and hopefully we'll hear from you again sometime in the future, Lloyd. Everybody else, of course, hopefully you'll join us again later this month, Thursday the 24th of September, when we have the session on selecting a public cloud managed service provider. And if not, see you again sometime soon. So that concludes the proceedings for today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Simon. And thank you to those people that listened as well.